Hey guys, in today's video, I bring you an incredible and chilling story. Let's meet Celine Rainier, a young woman from Seattle who, in a near-death experience, saw something surprising. November 6th revealed in paradise. During this journey between life and death, she met Jesus and received an impactful prophecy that promises to transform the destiny of humanity. What she saw will leave you speechless. So, before we start, leave your like, subscribe to the channel and activate the bell so you don't miss any content like this. Now, get ready for an intense and surprising journey into the unknown. My name is Celine Rainier, and what I'm about to tell you is not easy to understand or believe. I was born and raised in Seattle, and like many, I lived a quiet, normal life until an event that changed everything. I have always been curious about the unknown, but I never thought I would come face to face with it. I never imagined that my life would be marked by such an intense experience, which would open my eyes to a reality beyond our understanding. It all started on a cold, dark night, returning home after a party. I was in my last year of high school and, like any other teenager, I thought more about graduation and the future than about something as serious as life and death. That night, the car I was in skidded on a tight curve. I remember the sound of the tires screeching against the asphalt, the cold I felt as I lost control, and then the brutal impact. It was as if the entire world had shattered around me in a single instant. The paramedics arrived quickly, but I was already unconscious, suspended between life and death. I was taken to the hospital in critical condition, and after tests, doctors discovered that I had suffered a brain concussion. It was then that I fell into a coma, a deep sleep that lasted 5 days. These days, however, were not empty or peaceful. Inside my inert body, something strange was happening. I could feel my body there, but I was trapped, unable to move or react. I heard fragments of conversations, like distant echoes, and I felt a constant pain, a dull pressure in my head. In moments of greater clarity, I listened to my mother. She talked to me, held my hand, and sometimes even cried, begging me to come back to her. There was something in her voice that broke my heart, and yet I was frozen, unable to respond. It was as if I was locked inside myself, trapped in a state between consciousness and deep sleep. "Please, Celine," I heard my mother whisper, her voice cracking with emotion. "Come back to us." These words seemed to penetrate the silence in which I was enveloped, a prayer that reverberated like an anchor tying me to this world. I wanted to respond, but I felt something stronger calling me to another place. It was as if there was a path that was beginning to open up before me, a path that was pulling me away, a journey that soon I would be unable to avoid. As I floated in this undefined state, a feeling came over me. I felt my body there, immobilized, trapped, but at the same time, I realized that a part of me was light, as if I could simply rise up and escape that prison of flesh and blood. There was a kind of soft light around me, a presence that I couldn't explain but that seemed gentle, inviting. It was like I was on the edge of something new, something I didn't understand but that called to me. With effort, as if testing an invisible limit, I felt my consciousness rise. Suddenly, I detached myself from that injured body, leaving like a breeze escaping through a crack in a window. As I looked down, I saw my body lying on the hospital bed, with the monitors on and lights flashing around me. I felt no pain, just intense lightness and well-being. It was as if a part of me that had always been hidden could finally express itself freely. For the first time, I looked at my own face from the outside, and it was strange to see myself like that, motionless, with wires and tubes connected. I walked around the room, passing my fingers over objects that were on the table next to the bed, but my fingers passed through them, as if I were made of smoke. The environment seemed familiar, and at the same time distant, as if I were in two places at once. I felt whole, but I knew that shape was something new for me. With curiosity, I approached a mirror in the room. When I looked at him, I saw a version of myself, but different. I was still me, but in a way that was hard to explain. There was a soft glow around my face, a lightness in my eyes that I'd never seen before. This version of me seemed calm, serene, as if it carried a secret that the me from before didn't know. The mirror reflected more than my image. It reflected a part of me that had perhaps been there for a long time, waiting to be discovered. At that moment, A mixture of confusion and fascination came over me. Was I dead? That was the only logical explanation my mind could find. But at the same time, I knew I was still connected to my body in some way. It was as if I had been split in two, one part here, exploring, and the other part there, inert, in bed. I wanted to understand what was happening, but I knew I was just at the beginning of something bigger, something that would go far beyond what I could imagine. It was then that I heard footsteps in the hallway, and a feeling that something else was about to happen began to grow inside me. This floating eye seemed ready to discover a new reality. While still exploring this state of freedom, listening to the distant echoes of the monitors in the hallway, something caught my attention. Soft footsteps and a subtle light appeared at the bedroom door, like a kind of bright mist. I approached cautiously, as if drawn by a force I didn't understand. As I left the room, I saw a spiritual procession. It was as if a group was waiting for me, a parade of familiar and unfamiliar figures that radiated a soft, welcoming light. They walked in silence, almost floating, and there was something solemn in the way they moved, as if they were following an ancient and sacred path. Leading the procession, I recognized someone I never imagined seeing again, my grandfather, Elliot. He had passed away 3 years ago, and the longing I felt for him had never gone away. But now, seeing him there, I didn't know what to feel. He seemed so real, so present, and at the same time, different. He looked younger, stronger, and his gaze, which passed through me, brought a serenity that I had never seen in my life. Beside him was a young woman I didn't recognize, but who seemed to have a connection with me, perhaps someone from our family I hadn't met. They stopped and looked at me, extending their hands to me as if inviting me to follow them. The gesture was kind, but something inside me hesitated. Although I wanted to run to my grandfather, hug him and go with them, a deep feeling of distrust came over me. It was as if an inner voice warned me to be careful, not to get carried away. "Grandfather?" I called, feeling my voice echo. Although he didn't respond directly, he just looked at me with a calm smile and made a soft gesture with his head, as if saying, "Come on, it's okay." But I couldn't move. Something was holding me to the ground, and deep within my being an uncomfortable feeling. An intuition told me that this was not my destiny, at least not yet. I stepped back a little, shaking my head, and then the young woman next to him lowered her hand, looking a little disappointed but understanding. I stood there motionless as the procession continued down the hall, slowly disappearing like mist dissolving in the wind. My grandfather's face was the last to disappear, and even as the light around them faded, he continued to look at me, as if he wanted to tell me something important. After declining the invitation, I felt overcome with a mix of relief and sadness. I had refused something that, at another time, I might have accepted without thinking, but now it seemed right. I still didn't know what awaited me, but I had a strong intuition that this decision was important. I felt like there was more to me, something I needed to discover before I left. It was at that moment that an even more intense light began to fill the environment around me, radiating an unparalleled feeling of peace and love. I felt this new presence was different. It didn't invite me to follow, but it seemed to envelop me, as if preparing me for something greater, a destiny I couldn't avoid. As soon as the procession disappeared, the hall fell into complete silence. But that silence didn't last long. An intense light began to fill the space around me, first appearing as a small beam, which quickly expanded until it enveloped everything. It was a soft light, but at the same time, overwhelming. I felt surrounded by a presence so powerful that I couldn't be ignored. This light not only illuminated, she conveyed deep and indescribable feelings. The moment the light touched me, I felt a peace I had never experienced before. It was as if all the weight of the world, all the pain and all the fear just evaporated. Instead of these feelings, a wave of love took over me, an unconditional and absolute love, which seemed to accept me completely, without judgment, without expectations. It was hard to believe. Even I, who was always skeptical and analytical, was overwhelmed by that feeling. The light seemed to move around me, almost as if it had an intelligence of its own, and little by little I felt myself being drawn into it. Without resistance, I let myself be carried away, and soon found myself going through what I can only describe as a tunnel of vibrant colors. Each color had a life of its own, a unique quality that seemed to permeate my soul as I walked past it. There was the blue of peace, the pink of love, the green of compassion, and each shade seemed to grant me a gift, a sense of completeness that I had never experienced. As I walked through this tunnel, I realized I was becoming a fuller version of myself. Every part of me, every memory, every feeling seemed to come to new life. This place, this space between the material and spiritual world, had a purifying quality. I felt like the colors and light were clearing away any pain or suffering I might carry, any doubts I might have. There was something almost sacred about passing through that tunnel. At a certain point, I started to hear a soft melody, like music that came from a distant place, but at the same time seemed to be inside me. It was a song that carried a message of peace, a melody that told me that everything was okay, that I was in the right place, that there was a purpose for everything that had happened. "Am I ready?" I asked out loud, not really expecting an answer, and, as if the light understood my question, it increased in intensity, surrounding me even more intensely. At that moment, I understood that I was going to a special place, a place where all the answers would be revealed, where I would finally understand what it all meant. There were no more doubts, nor fear. The tunnel stretched out before me, and I was ready to move on. At the end of the tunnel, an even brighter glow awaited, and I knew, somehow, that this light was the beginning of a new reality, a destiny I had never imagined. It was heaven, or what I believed heaven to be, the place where I would finally have the answers I was looking for. When I emerged from the tunnel of light and colors, I was greeted by a landscape of indescribable beauty. What I saw in front of me was like nothing I had ever imagined. There were fields that stretched as far as my eyes could see, with flowers so brightly colored that they seemed to have a life of their own. The trees had leaves that glowed as if they were made of light, and streams of crystal clear water meandered gently between gentle green hills. The first thing I felt was a wave of peace, a sense of belonging, as if I were finally home. This place was both unfamiliar and familiar. When breathing the air, I felt a renewing energy. Every step I took made me feel more connected to everything around me, as if that place was an extension of my own essence. It was then that I saw him again, my grandfather Elliot. He was there waiting for me, but now he seemed even more rejuvenated and serene. He radiated an energy of vitality and calm, and his eyes, which in earthly life had always reflected wisdom and experience, now shone with a joy and compassion that touched my heart deeply. He approached me, and I felt that our souls communicated without the need for words. It was a reunion that transcended time and distance. "Selene," he whispered, and his voice resonated within me like an old, familiar melody. "We were waiting for you." As he spoke, I realized we were not alone. A crowd of people stood around us, figures that I felt were my ancestors, people from other times, but that I somehow recognized. Some had features that resembled members of my family. Others looked like figures from times gone by, but they all looked at me with love and welcome. Each of these souls emanated a unique energy, a love that transcended anything I could imagine. Tears flowed from my eyes, not from sadness, but from deep and genuine recognition. I felt like I belonged to them all, that I was connected to each one as part of a sacred lineage. As I approached them, I was enveloped in warm hugs and looks of approval. It was as if they were all there, not only to welcome me, but to share a love that spanned generations and generations. "You are part of something bigger, Selene," my grandfather said, smiling as he held my hands. "We are part of you, and you are part of us. We are here to remind you that you will never be alone." In the midst of this reception, the environment seemed to take on a life of its own, as if the sky itself was celebrating that moment. There was a heat that filled the air, an energy that pulsed through the flowers, the trees, every part of the place. The streams shone more brightly, as if reflecting the love and joy of each soul present there. I wanted to remain there forever, in the midst of that collective embrace of love and belonging. But I felt, deep down, that this was just the beginning. I knew that something bigger awaited me, a truth that I still needed to understand. Feeling my heart overflow with love and peace, I realized that I was about to discover secrets that would forever transform my perception of life and the universe. While I was still absorbing the love and welcome of my ancestors, I felt a presence in the distance, an energy that radiated serenity and authority. The crowd around me opened up, as if they knew I needed to move forward to an encounter that would transcend everything I had experienced so far. There, standing, was an austere-looking man, with a firm posture and deep gaze that conveyed ancestral wisdom. Even without being introduced, I knew who he was. Abraham. Abraham looked at me with a serenity that I had never encountered in life, a calm that seemed to encompass his entire essence. He approached me, his step steady and gentle, and he gave a slight nod of his head, as if greeting me in an almost ritualistic way. "Welcome, Selene," he said in a voice that sounded like soft thunder, echoing in my mind. "You are in a place where time and space meet and dissolve. Here, you will be able to see and understand more than you ever could in your earthly life." As he spoke, I noticed that everything around me seemed to gain a greater intensity. The trees, the flowers, the air itself vibrated with a special energy, as if every element of that place was alive and pulsating with a deeper truth. He reached out his hand and guided me along a path that wound through fields covered in flowers of indescribable beauty. The colors around us were so vivid that they seemed to surpass anything my human mind could conceive. Every step we took brought new landscapes, each one more impressive than the last. Flowers that changed color as we passed, streams whose waters reflected not only light but also emotions and memories, and trees whose leaves whispered words of comfort and love. It was as if the entire environment was an extension of the love and wisdom that Abraham emanated. "This is paradise," he said softly, sensing my fascination. "Here, all things have consciousness and a purpose. Everything you see was made to convey love, peace, and wisdom. Every flower, every stone, every being is a manifestation of a divine love that keeps everything in perfect harmony." Paradise was not just a place. It was an experience, a sensation that permeated all my senses. Abraham led me to a huge tree with a trunk and branches that reached into the sky like a living work of art. He pointed to a flower blooming before us and said, "Everything in this place contains a part of universal truth. Here, you can hear and see what your heart has always sought." I approached the flower and, upon touching it, I felt a wave of compassion and love pass through my being, as if I had received an invisible gift, a gift that connected me with everything around me. Abraham watched me with a slight smile, his gaze full of understanding. "This is a place where the truth is revealed to anyone who is willing to see," he continued. "And you, Selene, will have the opportunity to see something beyond the borders of this paradise. Your journey is just beginning." I didn't know what to expect, but I felt like I was about to be taken even deeper into this transcendental experience. It was as if the sky was showing me layers of reality that I never imagined existed, and, guided by Abraham, I was ready to discover the secrets that the universe had kept for me. As we walked through paradise one alongside Abraham, a strange feeling began to wash over me. It was as if a new perception was revealing itself, something that pulled me back, a more urgent call, which overcame the peace of that place. Abraham noticed the change in me and stopped, his gaze observant as if he already knew what was about to happen. "Selene," he said softly, "there is something you need to see, something that has been prepared for you, but it requires courage and an open heart." As soon as he finished speaking, I felt a force take over me, an energy that seemed to guide me without me making any effort. Suddenly, the paradisiacal scenery around me began to dissolve, like evaporating mist, and in its place a vision emerged that took my breath away. I was in front of an image of planet Earth, but it was not an ordinary view. It was as if I could see beyond the surface, seeing layers of energy that vibrated around the planet, pulsing in intense, vibrant colors. As I watched, a date began to appear in my mind. November 6th. That date echoed inside me like silent thunder, an urgent message I couldn't ignore. I felt as if the universe itself was trying to tell me something through that date, as if an imminent event was about to unfold. It was then that the vision began to become clearer, and what I saw made me uneasy. It was as if the planet was enveloped in a kind of dark cloak, a mist that seemed to pulse with negative energy. There was turmoil, conflict, a kind of turmoil that made me feel a deep compassion for every human being. It was not a scene of complete destruction, but something that indicated change, an imminent transformation, and at the same time, a feeling of hope, as if a new era was about to be born. Abraham approached me, his presence calm and steady, and placed a hand on my shoulder, bringing a sense of tranquility amidst the chaos I was witnessing. November 6th will mark a turning point, Celine. There is no need to fear. This date will bring great transformations, and many will feel the impact. But remember that every change carries the seed of something new and better. I wanted to ask what exactly was going to happen, but words failed me. My mind was in shock and full of questions, but at the same time, a silent understanding dawned on me. It was not necessary to know all the details. What mattered was that I had been called to witness and remember the importance of this date. Abraham looked at me again, and his face was a mixture of compassion and expectation. Now you know, Selena, this date is a calling, a reminder that you too have a role to play in the world. Remember this when you return. Those words stuck in my mind. I didn't fully understand what this date meant, but I knew I was destined to do something with this knowledge, something that still eluded me, but would be revealed at the right time. As the vision slowly faded and the paradise around me began to form again, I felt like a new mission had been planted in my heart. As the vision of the future began to dissipate and the celestial environment began to form around me again, I felt a mix of intense emotions. The vision that Abraham had revealed to me had left a mark on my heart, a sense of purpose that I had never experienced before. However, this experience had also made me realize that something even deeper was about to happen. The atmosphere around me seemed to pulse with silent expectation, and I knew, without being told, that I was about to meet someone extraordinary. Abraham turned to me, his expression serene but filled with deep meaning. "You have experienced many revelations, Celine," he said, "but there is still something that needs to be done before you can fully understand your purpose. It's time for you to prepare for the gathering." He led me along a path between tall, majestic trees that seemed to bow as we passed, as if paying silent homage. Soon, we arrived at a river with crystal-clear waters, which flowed gently through luminous and delicate stones. Abraham stopped at the edge of the river and stretched out his hand, plucking a bright purple fruit that grew on a nearby tree. "This is the river of life," he explained, handing me the fruit. "Eat it, Celine. This fruit has a special energy, a strengthening that will help your spirit rise. You will need that strength for the next step." I took the fruit in my hands, feeling its smooth and pulsating texture, as if it had a life of its own. I brought it to my lips and, when I took the first bite, a wave of energy ran through my body. I felt a spiritual clarity come over me, as if my perceptions expanded and my mind became more receptive. Each bite seemed to connect me even more with the environment around me, becoming part of that energy of peace and harmony. When I finished the fruit, I felt different, like my spirit was lighter, more complete. There was a calmness inside me that prepared me for what came next. Abraham placed a hand on my shoulder, his eyes full of understanding and affection. "Now you're ready," he said with a gentle smile. "It's time to get closer to the one who will bring answers and show you the true love that sustains the universe." Led by Abraham, I was taken to a clearing where the light seemed more intense, shining in every possible tone, as if the sky itself was waiting for something great. In the center of that clearing, a figure of light approached. The figure was of an overwhelming presence, radiating love and compassion in a way so powerful that words seem insignificant to describe. Even without seeing details of his face, I knew who he was: Jesus. In silence, Abraham walked away, leaving me alone before Jesus. My heart accelerated, a mix of reverence, humility, and indescribable peace. I knew I was in front of someone who was the embodiment of absolute love, an encounter that would forever change my view of the world and myself. As I stood before Jesus, an overwhelming calm came over me. He didn't need to say a word. His presence was enough to fill the space with love and compassion. The light emanating from him was so intense that it enveloped every cell of my being, as if purifying me of any fear, doubt, or resentment I might carry. I looked at him, and for the first time in my life, I felt like someone truly knew me, to the depths of my soul. Jesus looked at me, and in his eyes I could see not only understanding, but also a silent invitation for me to let go of all my worries and expectations. Before him, everything I thought was important seemed to disappear, and what was left was just a pure essence, a part of me that I never knew existed. "Celine," he said, his voice soft and full of compassion, "you were called here for a reason. Your time on earth is not over yet, for there is something you need to do, something that is deeply connected to your purpose." These words, spoken so calmly, echoed within me with an inexplicable force. I knew he was asking me to come back, to return to the physical world. A part of me felt reluctant. I wanted to stay there, in that infinite peace, away from the pain and challenges of life. However, Jesus' gaze conveyed to me a truth that I could not ignore. I had a mission to fulfill, something I still needed to do. But what do I need to do? I asked, feeling the insecurity that lived in my heart. How can I help? I'm just one person, small and imperfect. He smiled with indescribable tenderness, and his next words sounded like a gentle melody in my mind. Each person's purpose is unique, Celine. You were called to bear witness, to carry within yourself the experience you lived and, with it, illuminate the hearts of those around you. Its mission is to be a beacon of love and compassion, a reminder that there is something greater guiding and loving each of us. These words were like a balm for my soul. I still didn't fully understand what it meant, but I felt like it was something powerful, something I would carry with me for the rest of my life. Jesus approached, extending his hand, and when he touched it, a wave of pure and unconditional love passed through my being, erasing any doubt that still remained in me. You will never be alone, he said, and with those words, he enveloped me in a hug of light. I felt every part of me being filled with love, with an energy so intense that it made me feel complete. It was as if the entire universe was embracing me, reassuring me that no matter what I faced, this love would always be with me. He then pulled back slightly and looked at me with one last look of encouragement. Go, Celine. Live with love and spread that love wherever you go. This is your mission. With these words, I felt that the decision had already been made. I needed to return. I needed to fulfill what he had entrusted to me. The love I felt in that clearing would stay with me forever, and with serene acceptance, I allowed the strength of my family's prayers to pull me back into my body. I knew my life would never be the same again. As the strength of my family's prayers began to pull me back, I felt the heavenly world around me begin to fade. The bright clearing, the face of Jesus, and the welcoming presence of Abraham and my ancestors seemed to recede, like a dream that slowly dissolves at dawn. It was a strange feeling, as if part of me wanted to remain in that place of peace, but the other understood that my return was inevitable, necessary. Suddenly, I felt a strange cold and a feeling of heaviness that began to take over me. It was my body, a vessel of flesh and blood, full of limitations, to which my soul was returning. The process of coming back was a shock. Everything felt heavier and slower compared to the lightness he had experienced outside his body. But then, I felt something else. The touch of my mother's hand holding mine, the sound of her muffled crying and her trembling voice as she murmured prayers. Celine, please come back to me, she repeated, with an urgency and pain that moved me deeply. With effort, I opened my eyes, and although my vision was blurry and the hospital light was almost blinding, I saw her. There she was, sitting next to me, holding my hand tightly, as if she feared I might slip away at any moment. Tears streamed down his face, but when he realized I was waking up, a hesitant, relieved smile began to take shape on his lips. Mom, I murmured, my voice weak and hoarse, but filled with a renewed love that I had never felt before. She wrapped me in a careful hug, careful with the devices and wires connected to me, but her love and gratitude were palpable. At that moment, I knew that the experience I had lived had transformed me in an irreversible way. I was not the same person who entered that hospital. Something inside me had awakened, something that now understood the inestimable value of every moment, of every relationship, of every gesture of love. In the days that followed, my recovery was slow, but every second seemed to have a new purpose. The visions I saw, the words of Jesus, the mission he had entrusted to me, all of this was engraved in my soul like a sacred mark. I knew this experience wasn't just for me. It was something he should share, subtly but truthfully. However, the depth of the experience was so intense that I was only able to talk about it with a few people. My mother, one or two close friends. I kept the experience like a sacred treasure, something that I felt was difficult to explain to someone who had never been on the edge of the other world. There was an urgency in me, but also a caution. How could I transmit something so transcendental to others? Deep down, I knew that my mission was not to shout to the world what I had seen, but to live in a way that reflected the love and compassion that Jesus had shown me. What about November 6th, the date revealed in the vision? It remained a mystery, a veiled truth that I felt like a responsibility, but whose details escaped me. I knew, however, that life would guide me to wherever I needed to be. From that moment on, my view of the world changed. Each person seemed charged with a divine spark, and I sought to experience the love I had experienced in heaven. I knew I was destined to be a beacon, not of words, but of actions, of small gestures of compassion and empathy. And although many didn't understand, I knew that life had entrusted me with a mission of love and peace that I would carry forever. With my return to the body, the journey did not end. She had just begun. If you liked this beautiful spiritual testimony, leave a like, comment on your impressions, subscribe to the channel, and don't forget to activate the notification bell to watch each new video and help us spread this message to a greater number of people. Until next time,